Looking at 2017 for the Minnesota Vikings, especially early on in the season, it seemed like if you had some hope, it would be yanked away. Had some hope, yanked away. More hope, yanked away. Like I go back to Sharif Floyd and his knee injury in 2016 where he missed the vast majority of the season. Coming into 2017, now all of a sudden you start hearing talk about there being nerve damage and he might never play again. So a former first-round pick that was a part of the middle of that Vikings defense, not going to be there. That sucks. Then the Vikings go out there week one against New Orleans. Sam Bradford looked majestic, flat out. He was the best I've ever seen Sam Bradford in the National Football League. Granted, it took 8 years into his career to see it. But when you looked at that one game, you're like, my goodness, who the hell is this Sam Bradford? And what the hell did he do with Sucky Sam that we've seen for so many years? But then, of course, because he's Sam Bradford, like I told all you Vikings fools, it was stupid to trade a first-round pick for him and a fourth-round pick for him because only morons that panic do that. He hurt his knee, then he missed some time, tried to come back and play, looked terrible, and ultimately was put on the shelf for the rest of the season. So it looked like you were finally going to get the Sam Bradford that you were expecting when you gave up 2 draft picks for him like fools. He ended up still being Sucky Sam because he didn't have the ability of availability, which is the single most important thing a franchise quarterback could have. Hence why Sam Bradford has never been or never will be a franchise quarterback in the National Football League. Then you look at Dalvin Cook, who you were able to get to fall in your lap in round number 2. And through the first 4 games, he looks like a future star. He looks like everything I thought he was going to be out of Florida State. He looked like the guy that I had a grade on as the number 1 running back in that 2017 draft class. He was magnificent. And then, of course, in the Detroit game, he tears his damn ACL. So you're looking at the Vikings a quarter of the way through the season. They've lost their starting quarterback. They've lost their future star running back, their 3-down back that was going to bring life to that offense. They're sitting at 2-2, and you're wondering what in the hell's going on. And you get to that Monday night game against Chicago. Sam Bradford starts, and he's terrible. You could tell he's hobbled. You could tell he's hurt. You could tell he's scared. He doesn't want to get hit. He can't move. He was dog shit. So at halftime, Mike Zimmer made the move that ultimately saved the Vikings season because Teddy Bridgewater wasn't ready to play yet. He turned to Case Keenum, the Cougar Cannon from Houston. That's right. The Case Keenum, who was there in Los Angeles with the Rams last year for that debacle in the last year of the Jeff Fisher experience. That Case Keenum. And you could tell once he got in there, this team had a little bit of life to it. This team had a different feel about it. And again, once it happened and they found a way to squeak out that win against Chicago, they didn't look back the rest of the regular season. In fact, they only lost one more time the rest of the year. In those last 12 games, they went 11-1. This team was cooking. Offensively, even losing Dalvin Cook, it didn't matter because Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon were a really nice 1-2 combination at the running back position. They were getting production out of their backs. Then you look at it, Case Keenum was a bit of a revelation. While he didn't play like a superstar, he made plays, and he made enough plays at enough times to allow the Vikings to consistently win and beat some really good teams along the way. And in fact, their one loss was to who? Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers, a team that went 11-5 them damn selves. So that's not exactly a loss to be ashamed of. But then you look at the seasons that Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs had at the wide receiver position, one of the best 1-2 wide receiver combos in the National Football League. Combining that with a defense that was second in the league in passing yards allowed, second in the league in rushing yards allowed, first in total yards allowed, and had a historic performance on third down. What did they allow? Like 25 or 26% of third downs to be successfully converted against them? Going back to the Purple People Eaters of the 70s, it was the lowest conversion rate against a team's defense on third down. When you can play great defense, like the Vikings were consistently throughout the season, when you can get a quarterback that makes enough plays with a running game and guys on the outside that can make things happen with a somewhat improved offensive line, the Vikings were cooking and they looked like a real threat to go to the Super Bowl, which was crazy because the Super Bowl was going to be in Minneapolis. 13-3 NFC North champs, number 2 seed, first round bye, and when they came out in that first half against the Saints in the divisional round, they looked legit. This team looked like the real damn deal. I mean, they were dominating the Saints. They were spanking the Saints. They were making them their bitches. It was 17-0 at halftime, and you had no indication that this was going to be anything other than some grotesque wipeout, washout, dominant blowout victory for the Vikings. And then the second half happened, and Drew Brees and the Saints offense got it together, and the Vikings defense started to struggle a little bit. The Vikings offense struggled a little bit. And then you get to the very end, where you had all this action going on, and specifically the last 2 minutes of the game. The Vikings kick a field goal. Then the Saints move down to kick a field goal. The Vikings get the ball back. Not a lot of time, no timeouts. And they are trying to make a move, but it might not happen. They just don't have enough time. And you go from the agony of defeat to the joy of victory just like that, with one of the most miraculous victories you probably will ever see in playoff football in the National Football League, with Stephon Diggs making that catch and Marcus Williams missing the tackle, and there's Diggs streaking down the sidelines, scoring the game-winning touchdown, a walk-off shot. How crazy. And at this point in time, it was right to think for the Vikings, this team that had overcome so much throughout the course of the season, this team that found a way to win that game that they had at that point in time no business winning whatsoever. You'd be not crazy at all to think that this was a team of destiny. It was finally going to happen. A team that was hosting the Super Bowl would actually be able to play the Super Bowl in their home stadium. How crazy would that be? Maybe the Vikings could finally hoist a Lombardi trophy. Then maybe they could finally exorcise the demons for the guys like Bud Grant and Joe Kapp and Fran Tarkenton and Jim Marshall and Carl Eller and Alan Page and Paul Krause and so many others. And then, just as miraculous as the victory was in the divisional round against the Saints, miraculously the Vikings, after putting up a little bit of a fight early against the Eagles, just didn't show up. They ran out of gas. They were flat. They were bad. Offensively, they couldn't get much going. And defensively, more importantly, the defense, which had been historically great against teams in third down situations, a team that was really tough to run against, or a team that was really tough to throw against, just let Nick Foles and that Eagles offense have their way on them. I mean, it was so bad where you've got Harrison Smith, who was first-team All-Pro, but wasn't even voted into the Pro Bowl on some reason that I still can never figure out. Harrison Smith, arguably the best safety in the National Football League, was screwing up multiple times. Like, his head wasn't in the game. He was lost. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. He was playing like a rookie. He wasn't playing like the guy that's been a force back there in the Viking secondary for a half-decade plus, a guy who someday may end up with a bust in damn Canton. And if you think about it, it's not that crazy to say it when you're talking about Harrison Smith. But my God, I didn't even see him make these type of mistakes when he was a Golden Domer back at Notre Dame. What happened? But just in general, you could say that about the Vikings defense as a whole. What happened? And then offensively, they just couldn't protect Keenum enough. That front four of the Eagles just created havoc consistently. And when you get a situation like that where the Eagles have a lead and they can be on the attack and you're the Vikings and you've got to throw the ball a lot, it's just not a good place you're going to be. And the Vikings got lit up and blew the chance to host the Super Bowl at their home field. Sucks. But to be honest, as a Bears fan, it doesn't break my heart. But also, as a Vikings fan, while it's heartbreaking, it shouldn't totally break your heart. Because when you look at the optics of this season heading in, this team really played above itself. This team really went about as far as it probably should have. Probably further than it should have. And in all actuality, it was almost like the football guys were balancing it out for that fluke win in the divisional round over the Saints. Like, that shouldn't have happened. So they made sure that the Super Bowl didn't happen for the Vikings in their home stadium. But with the guys that you lost in the starts of the season, to be able to sit there and say you ended up 13-3, winning your division and making it to the NFC Championship game, still has to feel like a pretty good season, especially for some Vikings fans who were really starting to get frustrated with Mike Zimmer. And even though they won't acknowledge it early on in even 2017, yes, there were Vikings fans that were sitting there and forgetting to say Skol, they were talking about fire Mike Zimmer. And I know that's true, and Vikings fans, don't you dare BS me on this one, because it's true. So what's next for the Minnesota Vikings? Well, they got a ton of cap space, almost $60 million in cap space, but they've got one big decision. And surely they could maybe go out there and try to still address the offensive line, maybe address some depth in other places on the team with some of that money they have in terms of cap space. But the number one thing they got to figure out is what they're going to do with the quarterback position, because they're in this weird place. Case Keenum's a free agent. They didn't pick up the fifth-year option on Bridgewater, which I understand because it would have been guaranteed for injury. But now he's back healthy, and he's a free agent. Sam Bradford, the guy that you gave up a first or fourth round pick to get, he's a free agent. All three of the quarterbacks that's played for this team this year, the three featured guys, if you will, the three guys that have NFL starting experience, are all free agents. And when you look at the Vikings, you always felt like with Mike Zimmer that he was never really truly bought into Case Keenum, that he never really truly believed in him, that he never really truly envisioned him being the guy that could take him to a championship. So did Case Keenum play his last game for the Minnesota Vikings? It's possible. Sam Bradford, you would imagine he's not going to be back, which leaves you Teddy Bridgewater, a guy who for all intents and purposes hasn't played a meaningful snap in 2 seasons now. Is that really where you're going to put all of your eggs into that basket? It'll be an interesting decision to watch, because you almost feel like they should bring back both Keenum and Bridgewater in 2018, let them battle it out, even if that means you have to franchise one and give the other guy more money, because it seems like it's awfully risky to just let Keenum go when you got so far with him this year, and then just sit there and turn to Bridgewater, who again hasn't started an NFL game in 2 damn years. Big decision coming up for the Minnesota Vikings. Looking ahead to the draft, where do they need to get better? I still feel like they need to improve on the interior of their offensive line, because I think one or both of their starting guards are free agents. And I don't know how great they were anyways. I feel like defensively, now that Sharif Floyd's career is for all intents and purposes done, you probably want another guy in the rotation to be able to play alongside Linval Joseph. You probably could use another edge rusher as well to go with Everson Griffin and Daniil Hunter. Brian Robison's probably at the tail end of his career. Maybe you'd feel like you could use a little more depth in the secondary. I know you've got Xavier Rhodes. How confident are you in Trey Waynes? Terrence Newman's almost 40. If this NFC Championship game showed you anything, is that he needs to be done. Maybe you feel like Mackenzie Alexander could step up, but even if he does, you still could use more depth back there. And then offensively, maybe getting a more explosive option as like your number 2 tight end to back up Kyle Rudolph. Maybe a thumper type of running back if you're not going to keep a Latavius Murray. The good thing for the Vikings is that this is a team that's pretty good. This is a team with most of their key core players outside of the quarterback position locked up. This is a team that, in theory, does not have a ton of holes. So you can go into this draft and think about best player available and go from there. But ultimately, the number one most important decision for this Vikings organization this offseason is going to be the quarterback position. And what do you do? What do you do? And we can all have an opinion on it, but I don't know what the right answer is at this point. And we're not going to find out the answer for several months.